Today we've got the Administrator of the Environmental Protection Agency, Michael Regan. Thanks so much for coming on.
Hey, thank you, Brian, for having me.
So I'll start with the most important question first. We're obviously contending with a Republican Party that is unabashedly hostile to the environment, to the whole mission of the EPA. Now, we lost precious time dealing with climate change during the Trump administration, and that was time that we didn't have the luxury of losing. What's being done to insulate the EPA from another administration that might be just as hostile, if not more, to its mission?
Well, it's a great question. And the good news is the employees at EPA are so resilient. What we've done is we brought them back to the table. They are a part of all of our decision making. We put policies into place. There will be no political interference of this administration. We will follow the science. We will follow the law. I think that gives them the courage to come back, stay at the table, and work as hard as possible to solidify as many laws and regulations as policies as possible, so that we don't see the loss of time and effort that we saw during the previous administration.
What did the EPA look like after the Trump administration had basically had its way with it? Like, what kind of an EPA did you take over?
Well, Brian, it was one that really frustrated me. I spent 10 years at EPA before leaving and coming back. Those were my colleagues that were not treated well during the previous administration. And so it's no secret, the morale was extremely low. During the last year of the Trump administration, I was told that over 1,000 EPA employees left their jobs. And so I inherited an EPA that had a smaller workforce because people chose to leave, and many were demoralized. Thankfully, we've come in, we've held all hands meetings, we've engaged the staff, we've put policies in place. People are back at the table and they're back at their jobs, and EPA is starting to hit its stride.
Have a lot of the employees who had left during the previous administration, has there been kind of a resurgence of those employees having come back?
We have a great recruiting process in place. We're hopeful that we get some of the expertise that walked out of the door, but we've also got our eyes focused on the future, and we're creating an opportunity where we can get a new young workforce to come in, pick up the ball where it was dropped, and keep running down the field. I'm excited that we're going to have a mixture of experience and new energy at this new EPA.
Now, it looks like the Buildback Better Act, as it stands right now, is going to be all carrots and no sticks, meaning credits for climate provisions, but not really any punishments for polluters. Is that approach enough, given the fact that our window to at least keep emissions less than 2 degrees Celsius is quickly closing?
I think the Buildback Better Act is just a part of a broader approach. The president is focused on building a better America. And so in that approach, you have the resources from the American Rescue Plan, you have resources from the Bipartisan Infrastructure Bill, you have resources from the Buildback Better Act, but you also have the core authority that agencies like mine have that will hold companies accountable. So yes, you have a carrots and stick approach with this EPA, because in this legislation, we are finally seeing the historic investment and resources needed to match our regulatory authority to make the bad actors good, but also to give communities those resources that they need to move as quickly as possible while bringing investments off the sidelines. I would say it's a combination of having sticks already in hand and these new legislative pieces being complementary carrots so that we get to the president's goal of building a better America.
Now, John Kerry had come out and said that the private sector can win the climate change battle for us. And yet critics are saying that we don't have time, that we need the government to act quickly because there's a cliff. Like, this isn't the normal evolutionary process where fax machines eventually give way to computers when the market's ready. So how are you reconciling needing the private sector with still using the levers of the federal government to speed the process along?
If we're going to meet the president's ambitious agenda, which we will, we'll need a public-private partnership. Our goal, and my goal as EPA Administrator, is to provide the rules of the road, to provide the incentives, but as you mentioned earlier, to provide some sticks as well. I believe if we provide the private sector some certainty and the rules of engagement, then they will be able to do what they do best, which is be innovative, be entrepreneurial in spirit, leverage technology, bring the capital off the sideline. And so I think it will require our regulations encouraging the private sector to be their best selves. And I believe that we can get it done in America.
Now, what does environmental justice mean, and why is that a priority for this administration?
Environmental justice really is important to this administration and to me at EPA. It's not lost on me that I'm the first Black man to lead the agency, and many of the people in the environmental justice community look like me and my son Matthew and my wife Melvina. Environmental justice and equity is part of our DNA, and these are communities that have been disproportionately impacted for decades because of racist policies, because of lack of political representation. And so we're seeing a disproportionate impact to Black and brown communities, low-income communities, tribal communities. And I believe that if we create regulations and policies that address some of these social and environmental ills, it will serve as a rising tide in this country. Our goal should be to protect every single person in this country, and environmental justice and equity will give us the platform to do just that.
Well, in a similar vein, we've been hearing for years how many Americans don't have access to clean water, how they're contending with lead pipes. Can you speak on how this issue, the issue of clean drinking water in the United States of America in the year 2021, how this disproportionately impacts minority communities and what's being done to rectify it from this administration?
We're laser focused on it. And I would say that climate change is exacerbating that situation. Many of these communities that have had poor water quality and poor water systems are seeing these systems be pounded by intense rainstorms and hurricanes. Listen, there is over $50 billion in the bipartisan infrastructure deal to be focused specifically on water infrastructure, providing good quality drinking water to everyone in this country. But we're not going to put Humpty Dumpty back together the same way. We're going to be sure that we put together a more resilient water infrastructure that not only is stronger and more resilient, but will provide clean drinking water to everyone in this country. There's approximately 6 to 10 million lead service lines still in use in this country. And we all know that lead is detrimental for our children in terms of impacting learning and impacting lots of qualities of life that they may want to experience. And so the president has charged us to replace all of the lead service lines or the lead pipes that are connected to our homes, our schools, our daycares, our churches, and our hospitals. And so I'm excited that, yes, this lead problem and water quality problem is a problem for our environmental justice communities, but it reaches well beyond that. And the bipartisan infrastructure deal aims to begin to change that game.
That bill won't have all of the money needed to replace all of the lead pipes. What's being done to kind of to finish the job as we continue, as now we begin to embark on the fixes that need to take place? What's being done to finish that job?
There are a couple of things. The first thing is in the bipartisan infrastructure deal, there are significant resources there to get the party started, so to speak. In the president's Buildback Better agenda, there are also additional resources that may have the flexibility to be applied to lead service pipes. And then we have the traditional resources that my agency, the Department of Education, Health and Human Services, they have as well. So we're going to aggregate all of these resources. But Brian, it gets back to something you said earlier. We're asking the private sector to also come off the sidelines because there are lots of economic development and job-inducing opportunities if we replace these lead service lines. So I see a huge opportunity for a public-private partnership that really, again, serves as a rising tide for our communities.
Now, you traveled to Greensboro, North Carolina this past week to visit Volvo. How is this White House working with domestic automakers to stay aligned with the goals that were laid out in the Paris Climate Agreement?
I believe it is important to leave Washington, D.C., leave the bubble, get out from behind the desk, and really engage with those who were asking to meet the task of the day. Volvo has committed to the Paris Accord agreements. Volvo has committed to 35% electric vehicles by 2030, 100% fossil fuel by 2040. They have a serious commitment. As we develop the regulations or the rules of the road for all of the automobile industry and the trucking industry, it's important that we understand what technologies are available and can be applied. So I'm here in Greensboro, North Carolina today, not only with the chair of Volvo North America, the president of Mack Trucks, but I also visited with the president of the United Auto Workers, one of the largest unions that's charged with providing jobs to make sure that President Biden meets his goal. Together, the three of us were putting our heads together to think through how do we meet these ambitious goals of tackling climate change, deploying technology, growing jobs, and making this country globally competitive. It's important that I have these meetings so that we can do just that.
I'm glad you brought up EVs because General Motors has said that it's aiming to produce only electric vehicles by 2035. Now, a lot of Americans are going to look at that and say, look, I'm just trying to put food on the table. I can't be worried about buying an electric vehicle. What's your message for those Americans who are wary of making the shift to electric vehicles?
I think we should assure the American people that we're putting the onus on the automakers. We are hoping that this transition can be back of mind for most people. President Biden, in the bipartisan infrastructure deal, committed $7.5 billion to put charging stations all across this country. We believe that if we put the charging stations all across the country, if the automobile makers create significant investments in a diverse suite of vehicles for people to choose from, they're going to naturally gravitate towards those electric vehicles because they're cooler. They will be as cheap as hopefully as our fossil fuel driven vehicles. But more importantly, they won't suffer from range anxiety because we will have invested in the proper infrastructure so that they can get those charges. So people will see that they are doing a good thing for the planet. They won't have the range anxiety, and they'll actually be driving cooler, faster vehicles. We believe we can make that case to the American people.
And I think, the irony with the right wing having settled on high gas prices for this past week as their outrage point of the day are kind of making that argument for you guys, in terms of yes, gas prices are high. Gas prices are always high. This has always been an issue that Americans have had to worry about. No one's ever happy with the price of gas. Well, as the cost of electric vehicles continues to come down, as charging stations continue to go up, this just makes it all the more attractive. I do want to end with this. I don't think that there's anything I can say to overstate the danger of not addressing climate change right now. And for a lot of young people, this is the number one issue. This is the world that we're going to grow up in. And naturally, we don't want it to be rife with wildfires and hurricanes and droughts and extreme weather. What's your message to those young people who feel anxious about the world that they're growing up in?
I completely understand the anxiety. Every morning that I walk out my house to go to work, I kiss my 8-year-old son, Matthew, on the forehead, and I'm ready to tackle the day. I recognize that I'm fighting for his future. And I believe that in order to fight for an effective future for him, not only do we need to put the proper guardrails in place to reduce the emissions that are exacerbating climate change, but we need to be sure that this country is nationally secure and that we have the jobs and the economic developments out there so that he can have a good quality life. And so I would say to young people, to mothers and fathers like myself, no need to be anxious. This is where America can perform and be at its finest. And we have a significant opportunity here, not only to mitigate climate change, but do it in a way that is good for national security, good for economic development and jobs, and more importantly, keeping this country globally competitive. So I'm excited about the opportunities, and the president's agenda for building a better America is within reach.
Great. Well, you have a lot of people behind you and very happy that climate is being taken into account with all of the White House's priorities here. Michael Regan, thank you so much for both the work you're doing and taking the time to speak with me today.
Thank you. Thank you so much.